I got there, and the first footage that they show me is the movies within a movie. And I'm looking at that footage, and I'm going, this is great. What the heck am I doing here? This is really funny stuff. This is dead on perfect. And then they showed me the live, the stuff with the people. I went, oh.
Will these films be as shocking as Possessor Sarah?
With all the scenes that I was involved with, where it was just 2 or 3 characters, they would reshoot The Master, they would reshoot anything that I was in, but when it came to the close-ups, they never reshot the other person's close-up. So they really had to be on the ball about the exact footage that they had, and from a technical standpoint.
No! Don't sign it! Think of your families, your mommies, your daddies, and Toto at home!
It's time for his injection.
It was intense, but it was also seamless and professional. I mean, I can't say enough about how Jill I was watching, I was a young actress in the industry, and watching her was watching such a pro. Young girl, my age, but totally able to come into an existing situation, self-possessed, and just boom, bring it. It was amazing. It was great to see.
All right, come on, you guys, help support our film fest. We are broke. We can give you these t-shirts for $20. Come on, 2 t-shirts.
Lots of these small little films, you just have no idea when you do them. But then that's true in any film that you do. I remember saying to Blake Edwards when we did 10, oh, this is going to be such a big hit. And he looked at me and said, honey, if we knew what made a hit, we'd have a lot more of them.
So Popcorn was an interesting project. What had happened was, for years I'd been interested in acting and such, and my parents were very supportive of that, and they were all involved in a whole bunch of different businesses as well. But they were always interested and supportive of the arts, and my mother, Sophie, was particularly really interested in the whole world of film and cinema. And so they started playing around with entertainment projects. They did a couple of Broadway plays they produced. They did a couple of TV things. And then they started tackling motion pictures. And this was a film that had a ton of parts for young people, and just seemed like a natural thing to try out and, try out. But, it became almost like a bit of a family project because we were all involved.
I had worked with Bob Clark, who was producing it and kind of had put it together. I think originally they had wanted him to direct it, and he says, "No, I don't do horror films anymore." And he had done Christmas Story and he'd done some other stuff, and he wasn't wanting to do horror films. So he had hired Alan Ormsby, which was a really good friend of his, and they had done several classic horror films together, so he says, let Alan direct it. I think it was his first time.
Alan Ormsby at the time was the director in there, and he was a very big fan of a film that I did called Catholic Boys, or Heaven Help Us. And the minute I walked in there, he was like, "Oh my God, Malcolm, I love that movie." And I said, "Oh my God, thank you." And he said, "Look, the role that you'll be doing is a guy in a wheelchair." And so I've never done a guy in a wheelchair before. It sounds interesting. And he goes, "We're going to be going to Jamaica." And I said, "Oh my God, I've never been to Jamaica. I cannot wait to go to Jamaica. It's going to be the greatest time. We're on this island and it's going to be amazing. Oh my God, I got this really great role in a film. I get to go to Jamaica. Unbelievable." So, that's how I got Popcorn.
I don't remember exactly. I just remember it was just a typical casting, except that I remember it was down to me and a friend of mine named Mark, interestingly, and I got the part. So I was sort of you know, a rising B film kind of guy. You know, I think I ended up in Fangoria for some other stuff and Tiger Beat for some other stuff. Like, you know, actually had like a full spread in Fangoria for another film called Phantom of the Mall, and which you may know, and that was another one where I was the anti-romantic thing. You know, I did have the relationship with the girl, but lost her, and so I was taking my revenge. And there was another film called Night Visitor where I was the hero, kind of the boy who cries wolf kind of character. So that was kind of the roles I typically would go for, you know, in that period.
I had just graduated from acting school at California Institute of the Arts, and I was lucky enough to get an agent right away. And pretty much like within the first few weeks, I mean, I booked a couple of jobs like right off the bat, and so they were putting me up for everything. I had, you know, my bleached blonde hair, and I was kind of like, you know, a little bit alterna chick, and so they were just putting me up for lots of stuff. And my agent said, Yvette, there's this part, you're gonna die. And I was like, what? It's a horror film. And she's like, shut up, it's a horror film. And I was like, no, this is amazing. And then she told me, and I had been a fan of Bob Clark's because I really loved the original Black Christmas. And so Alan Ormsby, who is, you know, legendary. And I was like, I know these people. And I was nervous because I sort of like came into auditions like, I'm fresh, I don't know anybody, I'm cool, and that like gave me a lot of swagger. But I was a complete like, you know, little giddy dork in these auditions, and so it was a big deal for me.
I just remember, because, you know, before we even started shooting, some of the others might have talked about, we were there for at least a week, maybe even 2, I don't remember exactly. It was interesting because usually you don't have a lot of time to rehearse and prepare before a movie at these levels. And we spent a lot of time together, like as a cast. Like we kind of bonded. And we did all kinds of like theater games. It was really interesting.
We were all very close. We were all really good friends. What Bob and Alan did before the actual, before we started shooting, they brought the cast out for 2 weeks of acting class, basically. And so we had a lot of time to bond because we were supposed to play best friends, you know. So we had a lot of time where we were together and eating and camaraderie and exploring Jamaica and doing things that really built something.
Really, you know, there were times, I think one of the things that helped everybody in the cast bond the most is 2 or 3 times we didn't really know if we were going to be able to finish shooting. And directors were changing and we're waiting to see if the money's there. It was a whole new experience for me around that, coming from very big budget studio films.
Didn't get very far into shooting. I think it was a couple of weeks. Or maybe it was a month. I can't remember. But didn't get that far into shooting, but there was a lot of grumblings that it wasn't working out, it wasn't looking right, this and that.
All I remember hearing is some things like, just there was definitely creative differences. But I do remember one moment, I think it was with Alan. I was shooting a scene. I remember I was having to walk into this house, and the director, I think it was Alan, he gave me these directions. And it was like, okay, so when you walk in, you're gonna walk 3 steps, and then you're gonna stop, and then you're gonna look in the mirror, and then you're gonna get startled by your reflection, and then you're gonna walk 3 more steps, and what you're thinking at this moment is da-da-da-da-da, and then you're gonna make it, and I remember by the time he said action, I couldn't even move. There were so many directions in my head about what to do, and I remember in that moment, really, this was before anything had really happened, going, we're in trouble. Because if this is the way things are being directed, it was so intense. And I just remember it wasn't too long after that things started getting shaken up.
Alan's a really good director, and he's an incredibly creative guy. And this is what I think I remember, is that there were the films within the film, these little black and white films. So I think that Alan took a real long time. This is what I can remember. So I think he took a real long time in directing those. And, you know, when you're on a budget, you know, you're doing, you got to come in time, and you have to, you know, make sure that that you're, you know, with the executive producers, that you're doing what they want you to do. And I think that there was a problem in timing. That's what I remember. I don't think it had anything to do with friendships or clashing of personalities. I really think it had to do with timing.
The production of the smaller films and the direction that the smaller films were taking was something that I think that he was, you know, he was very detail oriented about it, and this was his first directorial project. I think that it was it was their visions really did sort of like take a T-bone. They just kind of like went in different directions. There was some, you know, they were overscheduled. I think they were just afraid that if this kept going, that it would just derail the project because of budget overruns. And I think that there was also, to be frank, there were issues with our lead actress, you know, with the previous one, Amy O'Neill, that Alan Ormsby threw down on, and to his credit, he was like standing behind her.
I loved Amy. I thought she was great. I guess, you know, when you're watching dailies and it's not working, you know, you're about a week in, you know that you can maybe let that person go because you're not so far in. I mean, I would assume that once you go 3-4 weeks into filming, you really don't have a choice other than just keep on going. But because we were so close into principal photography starting, they were able to, you know, let Amy go and bring Jill in.
We were actually together. Because we shared an apartment during that time, and we were together when she got the call, and it was devastating. It was really devastating. Because we didn't know. There wasn't a clue. So it happened that fast, and they told her that she had to get her things together, and she was booked on a plane, and they booked me to go to Miami with her, you know, because that's how close we all were and that's how hard it was. So I actually, you know, they had me go with her so that we could say a really nice goodbye. And then Jill was at the airport coming back on the same plane when I was returning to Kingston. So it was just like, you know, they made it happen very quickly.
Same dream. There's smoke. Someone takes her hand. She's running. The same man comes towards her.
I was on another film called Rich Girl, and they had some financial problems at the last second, a week before it was finished being done. And I popped over to my agents like the first day we were finished, not finished with that job, but where it stopped. And I was at the agency and casually having fun with my agent, and I got a phone call while I was literally standing there to come and do Popcorn to replace the leading actress. And the only stipulation was that I had to leave the next morning, and this was 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
I had a 3-week-old son, my second-born son, and literally I got a phone call, come and direct this movie. I had directed some shorts, and he had seen that I could do it. And I was on a plane and in Jamaica like 36 hours, I think, after I got the phone call. So I had no knowledge of it. And I got there on the set, and literally I walked on the set. My first scene was a scene where Tony Roberts is up in the catwalks above the stage, and he just sort of motions and waves down. And I called that shot, and he did it, and I said, okay, cut. And then I went off to watch dailies to see where we were and what I had to do and what the heck. I had not had the script. I had not had anything. So it was pretty thrown into the fire.
Sometimes I think when it comes to actors and directors, because the director was replaced as well, it's not always that somebody's not doing an efficient job. there's a thing to casting, you know. You have to be right for the part, and sometimes you get in there and it just isn't quite working. It doesn't mean that somebody's not a wonderful actress.
What is it?
I don't know. Doesn't look very long. Want to run it and find out?
Why not?
The film changed big time because she played the character differently, and it's after the initial beginning shock, it felt like it was rolling really nicely after the change.
I look like a fucking snow cone.
It was a very bonded crew. It was a really bonded, you know, group of actors. I think that everything that you see on camera is very much who these people were and what we were, because we were always goofing around. It was almost like, you know, the camera just like picked us up doing these things, because we were always a group of total cut-ups, total, you know, film nerds, basically.
Hey, but it's not a speedway, you know?
One of the first things we reshot was a big group scene with basically everybody in it. It's the scene where they're in a classroom and they're announcing that they're going to have the Horror Fest. And I'd seen the footage. It was dreadful. It was like lazy and it was just horrible. And so I go in and we start to shoot, and I'm getting the same performances. And I'm looking at the cast, and I'm just meeting the cast because they've already been there. And it's like they're on vacations, Jamaica, man, yeah, man. And so I finally stopped. I said, you know, you may have some impression of how you're doing that's different than the reality. Let me tell you, I've seen this, and this really sucks. So you can be here on vacation, or you can pretend that we're really, you know, I don't know how many opportunities we have to make movies in our lives, but this is one of them. So let's do it well. So that was their first experience with me, and that scene turned out better than it had been, and that's sort of how it went for the rest of the movie.
The very first scene that I did was in the bed when I was asleep at the beginning of the film. They started right at the top, and in that particular case. And because I was so tired, I told you I got in late and then had all these wardrobe fittings, no sleep, like 2-3 hours sleep or something. And during the shot, when they were filming it, they literally pulled my toe at the end of the bed because I had literally fallen asleep in that very first scene. And so from there, we did that shot, and then we went into that kitchen area.
More dreams, huh?
Yep. I'm not getting any sleep, but it's going to make a great film.
We had a real easy bond. And I remember in the dinner table scenes especially, you know, we laughed a lot, joked around a lot. And I've always felt very connected when we were working with each other. You know, some actors, you can be this close and you look right at each other, and there's like cars going through here because there's really no connection. But Jill and I just, yeah, we had a real easy connection going. And that always makes it easier because you can just fall into the moment and kind of let everything else go away, you know.
Well, for me, Dee, it was a whole nother ballpark because I would be completely tongue-tied around her. She was like, you know, I loved her. One of my favorite all-time films was E.T. And I just adored Dee Wallace. I just think she's a fantastic actress. I think she's one of the best actresses in Hollywood. She's just terrific. And so I was always just very polite with her and kind of, yeah, let her be the mom in more ways than one. Mom on screen and mom off screen, in that I was looking at her like a mentor, but never told her.
How do you vote? Oh, there might be enough money left over for some of you to do your own little experimental film.
Being a huge fan of Woody Allen films, it was a massive, like just an incredible pleasure to not only meet, but get to work with Tony Roberts. Like, that is an exceptional guy, like just a fantastic guy. And I've watched his career with, you know, so much interest over the years, you know, seeing what he's doing and stuff. And he's just a sweet guy and a real pro.
Is there an inherited gene for obnoxiousness?
You know, working with Tony Roberts was extremely fun. Working with Ray Walston, my favorite Martian, was outrageous. I mean, I watched him when I was a little boy.
Hello, Tony. I'm Toby. Yes, of course you are, dear boy.
I didn't get to talk to Ray Walston that much. He was pretty grouchy at that point. Like I don't think he was happy to be in Jamaica. It was definitely too hot for him. You know, so yeah, I didn't get to talk to him very much.
What you guys got in your festival are turkeys. And not fresh turkeys either.
They got a really good cast in that film. They really, really had a wonderful cast. And yeah, everybody was, there's a lot of memorable moments and not so memorable moments too. So, you know.
So, step right up and we'll all get started.
Well, Saturday night at 8 o'clock, know where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna pick my baby.
Jamaica was, you know how you hear about like horror stories of where to go and what to film. So there's just some like practical things that they didn't take into consideration, like the background casting. Everybody who showed up to be an extra for the film was black, you know, they're Jamaican. So, I mean, that doesn't work if you're doubling for, you know, whatever average American city or whatever, you know, so they had to make special casting call, find white extras to sprinkle in and put masks on different people and stuff just to sort of make it look balanced, sort of.
First thing I thought, Jamaica. God, my first location, by the way, was the first location shoot I was going to go on out of the country. And you know, everything I heard about Jamaica was going to be resorts and laid back, and I'm going to work, I don't know, a 2-hour day, and the rest of it's going to be laying on the beach drinking pina coladas. And it wasn't the resorts. It was Kingston. It was the capital of Jamaica, which is not exactly what you see, you know, in the films about Jamaica. It was a little bit more industrial, and there was a lot of poverty. It was a third world country. It is still a third world country.
You know, they pretty much treated us like royalty out there because, you know, it's a big Hollywood movie coming to town. So, you know, it had its strong points and it had its weaknesses.
Yeah, being a new mother and having to work, period, was not something I knew how to juggle very well. You know, I was old when I had my daughter. I was 40 when I had her. But still, you know, I was breastfeeding. And so try going to Jamaica with 2 cartons, right, of formula so that we would have something in case she needed to eat when I was on the set and the boob wasn't there. And I remember schlepping that stuff. I mean, first of all, when you have a kid, just when you have a kid, you have a shitload of stuff that you have to, you know, take with you, but then add all the formula. Yeah. So, and then, you know, I didn't know where in Jamaica, and I was concerned about how safe it was.
It was a wild time filming in Jamaica. They weren't exactly set up, you know, as a city or as a country to handle the scale and everything, but it was an attempt by a very powerful businessman there who was, you know, strong in with government ties and whatever, to facilitate trying to pave the way to create Jamaica as a bit of a filmmaker's destination. So that was the idea behind that, and I don't know how successful it was in terms of drawing more pictures there or whatever, but I do know that it was an incredibly interesting time. The theater they found there was key because they needed a really old theater.
Welcome to the House of Ushers.
The old Dreamland Theater.
The theater that we shot in Jamaica was a cesspool. I don't know how else to say it. It was an abandoned theater, and you walked in and it was quite obvious that homeless people used it to sleep, eat, and piss in. I mean, it reeked. It just really reeked. So it was pretty difficult when you weren't shooting to just hang out because you really felt like cooties were going to get you everywhere in that theater. It wasn't in a great district. It wasn't in a great area.
So what are we gonna do with the rest of this stuff, huh?
Dr. M said to store everything back here till after the war.
So you really get to start to know and get into people's businesses when everybody is in the same hotel.
There was a lot of flirtation off screen. There was, lots of cute people together on a tropical island. What's gonna happen?
I suppose the people that at that time that I was closest to were the people that lived there. I became good friends with a fair amount of people. I even had a boyfriend out of that experience in Jamaica and spent 2 or 3 years with this man after Popcorn, going back and forth to Jamaica. And lovely, lovely person. And that's it.
Lanyard.
Goodbye, Susan.
I had heard that the Lanyard Gates character hadn't been cast. I thought, well, this is interesting. I mean, they needed actors, and we're in Jamaica, so there was not a lot of people to choose from that would have suited the role. And I put a bug in Bob Clark, the makeup effects guy, his ear. He said, oh, I'll tell the director, or I'll tell the production, I'll tell somebody. And oh, that's not going to work. They're going to come back with it, but at least I tried. And he came back next day and says, okay, just go in, I want to take a look at you. And took a look at me, and I said, okay, you're hired.
Oh, he's so dreamy. Super, super dreamy. Like, okay, there could not have been a handsomer guy in all of, the world to be on a tropical island with. Of course, he happened to have this, incredibly gorgeous, gorgeous girlfriend.
And it turned out to be a pivotal character in the movie. I had no idea that I was going to appear in the movie as much as I did. I really didn't think it was going to be that. The 8 hours that I shot actually turned into a lot of screen time, which I'm kind of grateful for, actually. I had to do 1/30 the work of the rest of the cast.
We really enjoyed our time together. And he also would show me all of the effects. He would take me into the shop and show me effects, and it was just so, so fun.
The scene where I die is the villain. He puts on the face of the person he's about to kill, usually, and he's a master at prosthetics and makeup and everything. And so I play both sides of the scene where I go in, I stand at a urinal, the killer stands at the urinal beside me, also goes to the bathroom. I realize, holy cow, that's me. And then all of a sudden, the villain grabs me, throws me in the bathroom, and I don't know, orchestrated some sort of a explosive device in the toilet and, blew me up. So the cool part was playing both sides and having to be the killer and having to be myself, and it's fun.
Hey! What the? Oh. Hey! This is cute, Peter, but I have a queue in 5 minutes.
What was great about that death scene is that I got to play with Tom Villard a little bit in that thing. I wanted him to abuse me in there because he slaps me a lot in that thing, and he didn't want to do it. And I was like, no, man, you're the murderer in this thing. You're the bad guy. Do it. And I said, don't hold back. Just go for it. And it was neat. And what was really interesting is, the special effects back then aren't what they are now. So, it was really neat to pretend you're being electrocuted and then see the movie and that this whole glow, blue glow is around you. Because, you know, that wasn't there. Nothing was there except, you know, you kind of going, you know, and pretend you're being electrocuted. So, yeah, it probably was done in a few takes, but I don't think it took a long time to shoot that bit.
Toby's come up with a great idea. Go ahead, Tobe.
You, Toby. Here's our new idea. We do an all-night horror-thon.
I was really close with Tom. Yeah, we were really good buds. We hung out a lot after and during, and you know, he was a more experienced actor even, and actually even, you know, I learned things from him about breaking down scripts and just various things, and just life in general. He was really deep, and yeah, so Tom was probably the person I was the closest to.
Well, obviously we all have, you know, scenes with Tom in the film, and, you know, bless his heart, he was wonderful. You know, he was a very, very giving actor. He was a lovely guy to work with, and, you know, if you asked him to, you know, can you do it this way for me? And I was saying during the death scene, you know, there were things that I wanted Tom to do because it just made it look better. And he wanted to hold back because he didn't want to be, you know, rough. And I was like, no, go for it. You got to go for that sort of realism of who his character was. And Tom was an extremely, extremely giving, you know, actor.
He was just lovely. I mean, just so lovely. And, you know, it's hard not to get teary-eyed, of course, because he's no longer with us.
See, that crying thing happens so easily.
I loved Tom, and I thought he was extremely talented, and yeah, I just have only good memories of Tom.
He was such a gentleman. He was such a gentleman and a gentleman, and he had a kind word for everyone. You know, there's always little dramas on location. He, you know, flew above it. He was loving and wonderful, and he established just this warmth. And it's, you know, it was easy to be all swoony for him because he was lovely.
You're impartial. What's your opinion? Is he shy or what?
Look, I got my own problems. Just leave me alone, all right?
The thing that just keeps coming back to me, and I won't get too emotional right now, but is Tom. You know, the makeup, I've said this before, the makeup was really difficult, and it's really good, but I mean, he was 5, sometimes 6 hours in that chair. And the contact lenses, I don't know if you've ever worn those kind of lenses, but they're not really comfortable. And they were very painful, and he would have them on hours at a time. And about, I don't remember, it was a week or 2 into it, on top of everything else, he came to me and he says, I have something I need to tell you. I said, okay, yeah, what, Tom? What is it? He says, well, this is a very difficult role and stuff, and I'm going to give it all my all, but I think you should know that I have AIDS. And no one there knew it. It was at the time where AIDS was, in fact, a death penalty, and you would not work if you were an actor with AIDS. They wouldn't hire you. You were uninsurable. And so he trusted me, and he, you know, because if that had gotten out, who knows what would have happened? Maybe they would have, I don't know. I really don't know.
It's my scarecrow in Oz face. Cute, huh?
He's just a wonderful man, sweet man, talented kid. You watch his work in this film, and not only does he just go for the car, not only does he just is goofy and horrifying and everything in between, but he's just so physically gifted. He was a joy to work with.
So, shall we kill her? Or shall we spare this maiden? Show mercy to the tender virgin.
Please, Toby, no!
He was a sweetheart, always right there. No ego involved. Always happy and pleasant and available. You'd be surprised. There are a lot of actors that aren't available. Most are, and some are more than others. But he was just always a gentleman, always kind and loving person, and the world is not better off not having him here.
Lovely. Now, are we finally ready? Can we shoot this thing?
There were times when, you know, Ronnie, our DP, he had been nominated, I think, for an Oscar for Gandhi. I had this amazing crew, but he wanted, in the simplest scene where I'm just trying to steal a shot or just trying to get a shot, he wanted to light it so that it would be the most beautiful masterpiece. And finally, there was one thing, and it was taking 30 minutes and 40 minutes, and I'm looking over at Tom, and he's just like in agony. And had a long day, and I was kind of saying, all right, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. And okay, yes, oh yes, and then another 15 minutes. I said, all right, that's enough. We are shooting it now. Damn it, we are going to shoot this scene. And then Ronnie, you know, very British and very proper, says, but all right, but it will not look good. My relationship with this seasoned professional, state-of-the-art British crew, initially was like coming into getting hazed in a fraternity. They were not happy. Oh, here's yet another boy to come and work with us. And oh my goodness, they did not make it easy on me at all, at all. I eventually earned their respect, and several of them at the end came up to me and acknowledged that. But yeah, it was tough.
Mark came on, he had a vision, and he was very take charge kind of guy. I remembered him from Porky's, so that was a little bit of a nice little thrill for me. But yeah, he was really easy to work with, great communicator, and he and Bob made a good team.
Well, I have to admit to raising an eyebrow, you know, because I felt that we had spent a lot of time bonding with Alan. And I felt like I had a language with Alan. And I had seen the dailies of the mini films, and I was just so excited and so thrilled as to what the direction he was going to take with the rest of it. And I really appreciated how he would dialogue with us. But then when Mark came on board, you know, Mark had a whole different, he was an actor's director, you know, so I also appreciated that, but I have to be very honest to, you know, kind of having a little bit of resentment, because I was like, you know, who is this new kid?
Well, I found him extremely generous. It was new for him, and for anyone that does anything new, that's evident. It has nothing to do with their talent, of course, that's just experience. And I found him very lovely. He didn't seem nervous, he didn't seem scared, and he and Bob were friends. So, you know, they had a relationship, and I think there was probably, I'm just guessing, but I would imagine from that point of view, there was a certain comfort zone for him.
In my opinion, he was co-directing. Bob Clark was co-directing, but Mark will probably go, Malcolm, I'm going to slash your wrists for that one, because Bob wasn't, but in my opinion, but that's just, you know, one person's opinion. So I don't know what other actors will say. But I do love you, Mark Harrier. I really do love you, Mark Harrier.
Bob didn't want to be the director, didn't want to direct it, but Bob is Bob, and may he rest in peace. Love Bob. But it was, you know, I soon understood what Tobe Hooper must have felt with Poltergeist. There was always the room that, you know, Spielberg was like right here, and Toby's like, yeah. There was a lot of that going on, especially early on. Finally, he backed off, and you know, he had nothing to do with the editing. I mean, I basically, once we got it in the can, yeah, so I had that experience. I'm replacing one director and I have another big established Hollywood going, and I'm like, Bob. So, but we had a relationship where I could bust his chops, but because he was so familiar with me, he felt no etiquette of like going, oh wait, and I was like, so there was a lot of that.
I mean, that is one thing that has to be made very clear. Bob was in charge of that set. And Mark's talents were visible and there and important, but it was a collaboration.
I want to give the politically correct answer here, but in truth, Bob had his hands in it. I mean, he just had his hands in it, from my point of view. Other people might see it differently.
No, I directed it. For better or for worse, I directed it. If I didn't come, I think they pulled the plug. When we wrapped, we had a party up on the roof of the hotel we were staying at, and I don't remember, but it was more than a handful of people from various departments, costumes, camera and stuff, came up to me and said, you know, before you came, we were about maybe 3 days. We were giving it to the end of the week and then we were just going to walk because it was just such a cluster, you know. And but because you came on and because you were calm and because you were good-natured and because you took control in spite of him behind you and everything else, we decided, okay. And so, yeah, I directed it. Bob certainly was, I mean, there were times where, because we were behind, there was time where he would take one camera and I would take one camera and we would do stuff. But he had virtually nothing to do with the editing, and that's when you make a movie anyway. And so, yeah, I directed it. And I'm proud of it because it could have been a nightmare and not the intentional kind of a nightmare. It could have just been, and I think whatever coherence it has, whatever charm it has, I will happily take some credit for that. It definitely had a lot of cooks. I mean, Alan's hands are still on it very prominently. And the script got revised somewhat. And so, yeah, it was a stew. But I guess Bob was more the sous chef when it came down to it.
I got involved with Popcorn. My good friend Bob Clark, the director, who had some involvement with Popcorn, brought me on to do not only the musical score, but we did all the sound post-production in my studio here in Toronto, which is where Bob was doing all his pictures. We did Porky's and Murder by Degree and all of them there. And he felt very comfortable having music and sound and, you know, sound effects, dialogue, mixing, the whole thing under one roof, which made sense too, because you can make changes and get what you want, sort of a one-stop shopping. So he brought Popcorn to me. The process for scoring a picture like Popcorn really was not, I didn't get any feeling from the script. When I read the script, it didn't speak to me. It was just, it looked like a lot of movies, small movies, black and white movies within the movie, which gave it a very kind of a cool, almost, I don't know what the word is, but it's like a black and white Art Deco look to it, which you would look at it and say, well, geez, if I get nothing more out of the movie than just enjoying these cheesy black and white films, it's worth it. Kids then could appreciate what movies were like back in the 40s and 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. So you didn't get a feel for that until you actually saw it. When you could see the audience watching the movie, and you're watching the audience watching the movie, you got a real good taste for what the music should be. And of course that music was all big orchestral. There was no synthesizers in the 40s. Because it had so many different elements to it, the score really wasn't able to be figured out in one blast. All the orchestral stuff had to be recorded with a big orchestra. And then all the weird stuff with Toby putting the mask on, and you know, that was all very heavily electronic, which had to be done with machines and programmed and all the rest of it, samplers. So we had really much a duality to this score, two extremes, like 1940 sound and very much at that time 1990 sound, which is of course different than today's sound because technology is just, as you know, taken off. But at the time it was a very contemporary electronic sound, and it played well. I think it worked well with the weirdness that is, you know, I mean, it's a strange film. It really is an oddball film.
Before the horror of Halloween. Before the fear of Friday the 13th. Before the evil of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Before them all, there was...
Bob Sharon, my business partner, and I were both at New World Entertainment in the late 80s, and he was head of marketing and distribution, and I was CFO of the international operations. And the company was acquired by Ronald Perlman for its TV assets, and they were slowly shutting down the theatrical operation, and Bob and I wanted to form a new company. And so after a lot of time and the usual banging on doors and raising some dough, we launched Studio 3 with a somewhat unique business model that we weren't going to produce. We were only going to market, distribute, put up the P&A, and basically allow the producer to sit in the risk chair, meaning if they believed in their film, they were going to get most of the dough. We weren't going to be paying advances, and we weren't going to be producing. And so we launched the company and went shopping for films, and our first acquisition was Popcorn.
Well, Studio 3 was a new film studio, or I think it was a distributor, and you know, they took a chance on Popcorn, and I think another film which didn't do very well.
They delivered the film to us, and that was the film that we distributed, which was one of the challenges because of the rating. When we saw the film, we were pretty certain the film would be PG-13. We saw a marketing campaign for a PG-13 film. We saw reaching 14 and 15-year-olds to go to the film. It wasn't too scary, it wasn't too trashy. It was a little soft in both areas, and we thought we could do a great job reaching that audience. I think the biggest disappointment for us was the R rating, and we couldn't get around it. By then, the production group was in the wind. Nobody could go back and really do edits. The ratings board didn't give us specific notes. They said that the film was too intense, rather than, well, if you snip this or too much blood there, as it might be with a horror film, or language if it's a raucous comedy. We didn't get notes from them, we just got too intense. And there was no dough from the producers to edit it, and we wouldn't have even known where to start. And so that for us was the biggest challenge. We acquired the film looking at 14 to 18-year-olds and realizing we had to market it to 18 and above. It wasn't what we thought we would be doing with the film, and so that really threw a curveball at us. The one objection they had, the original poster had tears in the eye of the mask, and the MPA said that that implied that the face was feeling pain, and that it had actually been ripped off and there was pain. And since the poster has to be for, I don't want to say a G audience, but for all audiences. It runs in newspapers, it's on walls and in theaters. It had to be something that was acceptable to all parents and for kids to see. And they said it implied pain, and so we had to take the tears off. But that was the only change that we had to make for it. I wish I'd kept a copy of the original with the tears. It'd be fun to have it now.
You just never know. The first movie I did with Bob, that little crazy little comedy called Porky's. When we did it, we thought, oh God, this is just one step removed from a porno film. I mean, this is gonna bomb like a dog. And then I, find myself in New York. I was acting in a Sister Mary Ignatius, and it's like the hottest ticket #1 show in New York, and I'd finish the 11 o'clock show of that and walk out to Times Square, and they would be lined up around the block for Porky's, and it was the biggest movie in the world at the time. So you never know. You don't know. I would have thought Popcorn might have done better than Porky's, and it was completely the other way around. So you don't know. And it's alchemy. It's a mystery. There is no... Anyone says they know, they're full of crap.
I remember, I'll tell you what I do remember, is going to Grauman's Chinese Theater. It opened at the Chinese Theater. And I remember sitting there with Matt Falls and a few other friends. And Mark Harrier was a couple rows down from me.
It was weird to see. I mean, when you see yourself that big, I didn't even realize. I didn't even realize that it would be like, oh my God, you know, my face is that huge. It was, you know, an amazing kind of thing. It's scary. I found it scary.
I thought that they did a really good job because, you know, it was like, who knew what that film was going to look like when we were filming it. But I think they did a good job at editing. They did a good job at making the film.
I just knew that I really enjoyed the process and that I thought the film was super fun and it did everything it needed to do. And I knew that I enjoyed it. You know, after that, what it does in the world, I thought, you know what? It'll find its audience.
Took you long enough.
I had some gas.
Spare me the details.
It's fun. It's, you know, it's sort of a send-up of this kind of genre. It's got, you know, the movies within the movies are really a special part. It gives it a whole different thing. But it's fun, you know. It's really fun to have had that experience, and I still love show business, so it's fun to be part of that.
Yeah, look, you know, who knew that this movie 20 years later was going to have a cult following the way it does now? That I'm blown away with.
You, sir, have just received the Ted Bundy Award.
It was one of those films you think is just going to disappear, and here it is. It's going to be, you know, have a rebirth and with great fans, they're going to, you know, catapult it to, you know, a place where it should be, you know, in the ranks of all the other horror films with, you know, a comical bent to it, and that's great. That really is great.
She's coming too. Are you okay, Meg?
I think it's fun. It's fun. It has the comedy. It has the reality, the drama to it of, you know, people being killed, but it has that camp feel a little bit. But I think it's a fun horror film.
Welcome home.
To be in something that finds its you know, that finds its place with people, and that people can find something that speaks to them through it, that's what more? You know, what more could there be to be a part of something like that? It's pretty amazing.
Anyway, I want to get back to what I was saying.
Yeah, just hold that thought, okay? I gotta take a leak first.
We've got a queue coming up.
We got 5 minutes.
You know, it was a highly creative process, but at the same time, they're trying to stay true to the genre that they were spoofing. So, I think it was a real interesting and really enriching experience for me.
Well, thank you very much for your support and keeping the faith. I'm really glad you like it. It is a unique and special experience to all of us who did it, a lot because of how difficult it was. And the fact that sort of like it's like a wine where the process of making it is very messy and difficult, but then eventually the further you get away from it, the better it tastes. So that's, thanks for enjoying our little glass of wine that we made so long ago.
Saturday night at 8 o'clock, I know where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna pick my baby up, take her to the picture show. Everybody in the neighborhood is dressing up to be there too. And we're gonna have a ball just like we always do. mascot of Hollywood. And the popcorn from the candy stand makes it all seem twice as good. There's always lots of pretty girls, but figures they don't try to hide. But they never can compare with the girl by my side. Saturday night at the movies, who cares what picture you see? When you're hugging with your baby, the last row of the balcony. Saturday night at the movies, who cares what picture you see? When you're hugging with your baby, the last row of the balcony. Oh, Saturday night at 8 o'clock, I know where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna pick my baby up, take her to the picture show. Everybody in the neighborhood is dressing up to be there too. And we're gonna have a ball just like we always do. Saturday night at the movies, who cares what picture you see? Yeah. When you're hugging with your baby, the last row of the balcony. There's Technicolor and CinemaScope.